Welcome to Talkin SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses the latest news and breaks down the biggest games with the best analysts around. Now, from Southeast Alabama, a state that knows its sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Talkin SEC. I'm your host, Phillip Jordan from Last One College Football, a 96.9 legend in Dothan, Alabama. I'm in-studio host and producer, Dothan Football. On today's episode of Talking SEC, I'll be joined by Last Word on College Football teammate Mike Loveall. We will jump into the Tennessee Volunteers. We'll look back at their 40-13 win over LSU this past Saturday. We'll talk about what has been the difference with Josh Heupel as head coach versus the previous head coaches at Tennessee, and we'll preview Alabama versus Tennessee. Plus, I'll look around the latest news in the SEC, some quarterback updates, awards this past week in the SEC, rank this weekend's games, and also update a schedule for upcoming weeks in the SEC. You can check out Talking SEC on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. It means a lot to the show if you do that. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also watch the show over on YouTube, either at the Phillip Jordan YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and leave a comment on a video. I'll read that on a future edition of the show. Also over on the Talking SEC YouTube channel as well. You can always email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com or hit me up on social media at pjordansec. Everybody joining me on the show today is Mike Loveall. Take him over on Last Word on College Football. Does his Tennessee grades. You can check that out. It's up on the site. And Mike, I appreciate you coming on here. It's an exciting time with Vol Nation right now.
It is. Tennessee fans are really excited. The theme is not success. Tennessee fans have known success in the past, not necessarily in the last 15 years. Really, 2005 was the last SEC championship game that the Vols appeared in. But really, the theme is exercising some demons. Florida, a long drought against Florida. I think 2 wins in 17 years. And for LSU, for those that don't know the recent history, the last time Tennessee won was 2005, a game that was changed on the schedule due to Hurricane Katrina. That was the last win. Since then, Derek Dooley put 13 guys on defense. Tennessee thought they had the win that year. LSU got a free untimed down, went on to win the game, converting that play. And then the first game after Butch Jones's firing, Brady Hoke, the interim coach, 5 years ago now, a monsoon hit Knoxville. Very dry the first half. It was close at halftime, and then when they came back out, pouring rain. You couldn't even see from the upper deck to the field. Cameras, even if you were watching it on television, you really couldn't see the action. Tennessee fumbled the game away. LSU ran away with it. So with these wins against Florida, going on the road, getting an overtime win against Pittsburgh, and going down to Baton Rouge and having a convincing win against LSU, the Tennessee program seems like they're exercising demons. They're not just winning, they're not just being successful, but they're exercising some demons that have plagued them for 15 years now, and that's really what's so refreshing for Tennessee fans.
On that 2010 LSU game, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the game, and maybe because Les Miles era, there were so many crazy endings of games they can all lump into one. Was that the one where the ball went over Jordan Jefferson's head and then Tennessee had a penalty, or am I thinking of the wrong game?
Yeah, I believe that was the play. The quarterback, help me out here, LSU's quarterback.
Jordan Jefferson.
Yes. So, the snap went over his head, but Tennessee had 13 players on defense. They were trying to get – because they were on the goal line. I think they were on the 2 or 3 yard line.
That's right.
Tennessee's defense wanted to change the line, but they rushed a bunch of people out there. They rushed a bunch of people back. LSU was in a hurry because the clock was ticking down. They didn't have any timeouts. They snapped over his head. Tennessee thought they had won, but they had 13 guys on the field. Flagged. LSU gets another play. Jefferson puts it in for a touchdown. Tennessee fans just crushed.
Yeah, that just was the back then, the Les Miles really crazy days there at LSU. It felt like every year he had 1 or 2 goes, and I know Tennessee, which I remember the 05 game too, the Eric Ainge years with Tennessee, the 07 SEC championship game, Eric Ainge again, and then that was Ryan Perilou had to play quarterback, and then that's when I think that again Les Miles was rumored to go to Michigan by Kurt Herbstreit that day. So interesting stuff for them in LSU. And I was really intrigued going into this game. Of course, it's always weird watching a game in Baton Rouge at 11 o'clock. We're just used to seeing those games in prime time when LSU plays at home. But really interesting game because Tennessee comes out, they get the fumble on opening kickoff, and then they score a touchdown. And really, I came away from the first half. I thought LSU missed some opportunities, the fourth down plays, but Tennessee stepped up and made the plays. In that first half, they're up 23-7 going into halftime. I thought it was a bad decision by Brian Kelly to go for it on 4th and 10, punt the ball deep, make Tennessee run the clock out, going halftime 27. I know people say it's a small thing, but you go in with positive feelings, not a negative feeling for LSU. But anyways, on the Tennessee side of things, just how that first half went, the way it started, Tennessee taking advantage of some opportunities that LSU was giving them.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have started better. But you're right about a couple of things. If you're LSU, that's coaching malpractice, and here's why. You know that Tennessee's going to get the ball to start the second half, right? So you kick it down there. They're going to have the ball at worst at the 25-yard line, probably somewhere more like the 15 or 10 with about 20 seconds to go. You know Tennessee knows they're getting the ball, so they're going to take a knee. So at worst case, you go in 27, you tell the defense, hey, check it out. Twice they've been inside the 30, and twice we've held them to long field goals. Mm-hmm. We won. We're coming. 27, 13 points last week. We were down by 17.5. We can do this. Instead, you have a bad snap, so your offense kind of loses a little bit of rhythm. Now your center starts questioning himself. The quarterback questions himself for taking a 10 or 15-yard sack, which is inexcusable in that situation. And you hand the ball at midfield to the nation's number one offense, and they get 3 points. So now instead of going in, and they know that Tennessee's got the ball in the second half, so you put all the pressure on your defense. You got to have a stop on that first drive. Spoiler alert, they didn't, right? So now that coaching decision has cost you not only momentum going into half, you can't kind of go in there and say, hey, we stopped them, because, in fact, you gave them 3 more points, which in this grand scheme of things doesn't seem like much, but when you're playing a team as good as Tennessee, and I know how odd that sounds, but when you're playing a team as good as Tennessee, you can't give them any free points. You just can't with that offense over there, because they're going to get their points. And then you put all the weight on your defense coming out on the first drive of the second half. I'll be honest with you, Phillip, part of my takeaway from that game was that Tennessee's coaching staff just outcoached LSU, and really it was coaching malpractice on LSU. They had the 4th and 2 from the 2-yard line, down 10-0. They try to go for the touchdown instead of take the points. You've already had a fumble. You stopped Tennessee's offense from getting a touchdown. You made them settle for a field goal. Now you've got the ball down low. You're trying to get some momentum. You've had a good sustained drive, and then you give up the points. You go for a touchdown. You get stopped. And, oh, by the way, Tennessee's offense goes down the field, gets another field goal. So that's a big swing right there. That was bad decision number 1. Bad decision number 2 was the punt that we talked about, the 4th and 10 from their own 40. They could have punted it, half would have been over. And then the other bad coaching decision, LSU turned the ball over. Tennessee had it right at midfield, right on the 47, the LSU 47. What is the cardinal rule etched in stone for offensive play callers? On the first play after a turnover in positive territory, what do?
Take a shot.
You take a shot. That's it. Everybody knows that. LSU is playing one high safety and put the nickel safety on Jalen Hyatt, the fastest of the Tennessee receivers. What did he do? He blew right past him. Safety couldn't get over in time. Touchdown Tennessee. First play. Why you call cover high or cover 1 on that play, and you put your nickel safety on the fastest guy? No idea. It's inexcusable. 3 inexcusable calls for LSU's coaching staff right there. So yeah, Tennessee outcoached them, but it's because Tennessee coached it well, but it was really more because LSU's coaching staff made some really, really questionable decisions in that game.
Yeah, Brian Kelly even said going into the locker room, if anybody saw the game on television, we're being outcoached. And I always want to watch these games, especially when they're within distance of each other. There's not a complete blowout at halftime yet. How you close the half and how you start the half is something I always pay attention to. And actually with Tennessee, I'll go back to the Florida game, because I think what's won that game, I believe Florida was up 14-10. Tennessee scores a touchdown going into halftime. They score a touchdown coming out. Now you're up by 10. I don't think that gets talked about enough, how big that is like those final few minutes of that first half and then the first few minutes of the second half, that can completely swing a game. And we see it a lot that actually happens that way. And that happened here and happened when Tennessee played Florida earlier in the season.
Sure, it's situational football, and teams prepare for that, and more so than practicing for it, because the 2-minute drill in the second half is pretty much the same as the 2-minute drill in the first half. The level of risk a coaching staff will take is a little bit different. Obviously, you'll take a little bit more risk at the end of the second half than you will in the first half, but it's situational football. But you also game plan for that, and it's all about preparation. Your offensive play callers, your defensive play callers, they go through these. A good staff will go through this, and they'll say, hey, it's 30 seconds left. We're down by 10, we're down by 20, whatever. They'll throw out scenarios. The head coach or somebody else will throw out scenarios, and the two staffs will walk through that. A good coaching staff is prepared for those situational football moments. And you can tell that there are teams that aren't very prepared for those things, and there are teams that are well prepared for those things. On Saturday, I'm not going to make any systemic assumptions about either coaching staff, but on Saturday, Tennessee was well prepared for situational football. LSU simply was not well prepared for situational football.
On the defense side of the ball, Tennessee was really good in this game too. 5 sacks overall. They got behind the line of scrimmage on defense 9 times. And coming into the year, everybody assumed Tennessee would be really good offensively, just because you got Cedric Tillman, which I know he's hurt right now. Brew McCoy has been really good. The running game is really coming on. Hendon Hooker, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but defensively, they've been a very improved team. They're top 5 in SEC in points allowed per game. They're top 5 in sacks. I know points allowed per game last season, they were like 12th in the conference. So, they have really made great strides on that side of the ball as well.
I think if you're a Tennessee fan, the thing you walk away with happiest about Saturday's game is the performance of the defensive front seven. Byron Young named SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week today. I think he had 2 of those 5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and more importantly for the front seven, held LSU to 55 rushing yards. Now, I know that part of that is because in the second half you're throwing more, you're trying to quickly catch up. But still, LSU's inability to establish the run in the first and second quarter was really probably the biggest surprise of the game. With Hendon Hooker, Brew McCoy, Jalen Hyatt, you know what you're going to get with Hendon Hooker. You're going to get stability. You're going to get 40 points a game. You're going to get that steady as they go. That's probably Hendon Hooker's best quality, is his consistency. With the defense, with Tennessee's defense, you don't have that consistency. So I thought really the biggest takeaway for Tennessee was holding LSU to 55 yards and the sustained pressure they had on Daniels in the backfield. He got his passing yards. He got 300 yards, but a lot of that was underneath. Tennessee's secondary, which is absolutely their weakness, kept everything in front of them, did not allow a single big play opportunity for LSU, supported the run defense when they had to. So, yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for Tennessee was the performance of that defense, particularly holding LSU to 55 rushing yards, a team that really focuses on its running game more so to enable the young quarterback to get into rhythm. LSU never got that. They never really got their offense going on Saturday.
Just looking at the grand scheme of things with Tennessee right now, and I've always felt like this, the SEC's better when Tennessee's good. When in the East, it's Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. That's when the conference is best. And we can get into the West at some other point. But with what Josh Heupel has done, it's really been amazing. And I'll be honest with you, it was one of the situations for me coming to the season. Like, I knew on paper, okay, Tennessee did a lot of good things last year. But I was hesitant, Mike. I was hesitant to kind of jump because we've seen this before, Butch Jones, Jeremy Pruitt, even with Derek Dooley a little bit. They had one good year, and then the next year it didn't work out. But this team is really living up to expectations so far this year. What has been different with Josh Heupel to you? Because he inherited a mess. With what they had, he came into last year to go win 7 games was amazing. Should be SEC Coach of the Year candidate from last year. But for you, what are you seeing out of Josh Heupel that's different from the previous coaches that just couldn't do what he's doing this early?
Yeah, Phillip, that's a great question. And it's something that a lot of people think about. And to your earlier point, a lot of Tennessee fans weren't really buying into the hype yet either. And I'll be honest with you, the scary part is Tennessee hasn't played its A game yet. They took them. They weren't very in sync against Pittsburgh. Florida, they let Anthony Richardson have the day, his best game of his career. LSU was a pretty good game, but the offense stalled a couple times in the red zone. So the scary part is Tennessee hasn't even played its A game quite yet. That's the scary part. That they can be better than what they are. So to your immediate question though on Heupel, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I think what the difference is with Heupel is he's brought the fun back. He's a very genuine guy. He's just no nonsense. Think about the previous coaches. After Fulmer, you had Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin brought this big personality in, this flamboyancy, kind of a modern-day Steve Spurrier. He was willing to go toe-to-toe with Nick Saban, trading the barbs. He would trade the barbs with any coach. He brought a lot of attention, not necessarily in a positive way, to Knoxville. Then he leaves after a year. So he leaves in turmoil, takes a lot of guys to USC with him. There's the big thing with Orgeron calling the recruits, telling them not go to class the first day of second semester. The history there. All right. So then you have this frustration. You get Derek Dooley in. Derek Dooley, he was a fine position coach, a nice guy, but there was no focus, right? There was no focus. There was always this expectation. He was kind of learning how to be a chief executive at a big time program. He always had the weight of his last name there, but there was never any focus. The big thing on that is he didn't recruit a single offensive lineman in one of his recruiting classes. How do you do that? How do you not get one offensive lineman in your recruiting class? So there was no focus. The ship was kind of adrift at sea is probably the best way to say it. Derek Dooley leaves, then you get Butch Jones in. So Jones comes in, and then there's this massive amount of talent. There's a lot of talent on the field. Alvin Kamara, Jalen Hurd, Joshua Dobbs, Cam Sutton, all these guys, Josh Malone, all these guys are in the NFL now, and most of them are doing pretty well. Jalen Reeves may have been at linebacker. A.J. Johnson played for the Broncos for a while. There were 9 NFL guys on that roster. Emmanuel Mosley just tore his ACL for the 49ers. All those guys were on that roster at once. But what Butch Jones brought was this kind of this kind of false bravado, this marketing, this used car salesman kind of atmosphere. Remember, Jalen Hurd left the team only about 400 yards from becoming UT's all-time leading rusher because the locker room was so cancerous. It was so bad because Jones was never able to develop the talent. He was good at getting talent in, but he wasn't really a football coach. He wasn't a real X's and O's kind of guy. The practices weren't getting the guys better. There was a lot of infighting in the locker room. There was just kind of a negative atmosphere around the program with Butch Jones. You get Jeremy Pruitt in, I don't know what to tell you there. McDonald's bags full of money. The talent wasn't getting any better. There was just a lot of negativity around the program. You get leaders who are yellers and screamers, and that's kind of what Pruitt was. And the players were playing out of fear, and it just wasn't, again, kind of similar to Butch in a way, but different, a little bit more old school. If you've seen Two-A-Days on MTV, he was the defensive coordinator there with Rush Probst at Hoover, the whole 9 yards. So it was very negative. Look, Josh Heupel comes in. He just said, hey, let's have fun. And he is who he is. He's not bringing Josh Heupel Incorporated in, which is exactly what Butch Jones did. He brought Butch Jones Incorporated in. Hey, this is me, Butch Jones. With Heupel, it's about the players. He brought a system. He brought a focus. He said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to spread the field, and we're going to attack. That's it. And we're going to have fun doing it. Tim Banks brings in an aggressive defense. He says, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be aggressive. That's who we are, and let's have fun doing it. So I think what Josh Heupel has done is he's simplified it. He's made it exciting, and he's made it fun. He has the buy-in of the players. He's got the buy-in of the fan base. He's supported by a really good athletic director. That's what most people don't talk about. Danny White, coming from UCF, of course, that's how Josh Heupel got the job. Danny White is overseeing a renaissance in all of UT's athletic department. The Lady Vols are back to national prominence. Men's basketball has continued their success under Rick Barnes. Everybody knows the story about the baseball team last year, the success that they had. Are even down to volleyball. They're getting better. Golf is leading the SEC right now. Tennis, whatever. I'm not going to go down the whole thing, but Danny White is a part of this. The point is Danny White's a part of this success too. Getting all facets of the Tennessee athletic department moving forward, including football, bringing Heupel in and allowing him to do what he does. Danny White is great with interacting with the fans. He's bought into a couple of things, putting the letters back up on the stadium. These are things that most athletic directors would be like, come on, give me a break. I don't have time for this. Danny White's like, hey, you know what? The fans want it. I got millions of dollars. What's 4 letters on the stadium? Do it. You want to check her kneeling? Fine. But push it out on our social media. They do it. He's like, man, the fans love this. They're eating this up, right? Mm-hmm. So part of the success is Danny White being a great athletic director as well. But I think bottom line is Josh Heupel's come in. It's exciting, it's focused, and it's fun. That's really what's changed the culture. He's a genuine guy. He's not really in it for himself. He's in it for the kids and to win football games and to have fun playing football.
Talking about fun, it's going to be fun this Saturday. I feel like Knoxville is going to be on fire this Saturday. Game day. Alabama's coming to town. We know the history. Have not beat Alabama since 2006, 16-13 win. Arian Foster scored late in that game to give Tennessee the victory. These are the 2 best offenses in the SEC, scoring offenses. Alabama's now the best rushing offense. We know who Alabama has on defense. The Bryce Young question. We're recording this on a Monday. Everybody, it released on Wednesday, but Nick Saban's hopefully we'll have Bryce Young on Saturday. So for you going into this matchup, what's the keys, particularly on the Tennessee side, for them to end that streak and to finally to beat Alabama? Of course, they haven't beat Saban, so to kind of end that deal for them.
Yeah, I'll just start out real quick. A lot of people, particularly of our age and younger, don't understand the magnitude of the third Saturday in October. Tennessee Alabama used to be the number 1 rivalry in the SEC for a long time, and maybe still Tennessee has more wins against Alabama than any other team in college football. This used to be one of the premier rivalries in sports. Obviously, since the mid-2000s, it's kind of waned because it's been so one-sided. As far as the keys to the game, I think number 1 key is absolutely Bryce Young. Tennessee has showed the ability that if you bring a one-sided quarterback into a game, whether he's a thrower that can't run very well or if he's a running quarterback that can't throw very well, Tennessee's defense is not the best, but they're not going to let you beat they're not going to let you beat the Tennessee offense with a one-dimensional quarterback. If Bryce Young plays, I think that changes the dynamic. If Milroe plays, I don't know. That hurts. It certainly hurts Alabama, right? Mm-hmm. So Bryce Young's status is certainly the most important thing, and him staying healthy during the game. I think I'm interested to see how Alabama's defense holds up to Tennessee's tempo. Going back to what I said earlier, that Tennessee hasn't played its A game. One of the things that people haven't picked up, or one of the things that people haven't talked about really, is that in games where Tennessee has been able to get the lead, Florida and LSU, Josh Heupel has learned how to harness the system and leverage it to take time off the clock. They'll stay out there, they'll stay in formation, but they'll still run the clock down. They just don't change personnel out. Tennessee really hasn't had to go up-tempo a full game yet. They kind of did it against Pittsburgh, but there were times during the Pittsburgh game where they tried to control the tempo. It kind of went back and forth. Like I said earlier, they weren't really in sync for the Pittsburgh game. If they're in sync and they keep that tempo up all game long, go back to Ole Miss last year, which they did, they wore that Ole Miss defense down. I'm interested to see how the Alabama defense handles that tempo. They have not played, I don't care what anybody else says, they have not played a team that has the tempo of Tennessee. There's only a couple schools in the nation that run a tempo offense like Tennessee, and Alabama hasn't played them. So it's going to be interesting to see how that really, really good Alabama defense handles that tempo if Tennessee can put some drives together and get string a couple first downs together. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Tennessee handles the pressure. Like you said, game days in Knoxville, SEC Nation's in Knoxville, Josh Pate's in Knoxville. Everybody's in Knoxville this weekend. Everybody. Game day back for the second time in 4 weeks. Everybody knows the history of this. Tennessee has exercised the Florida demon. Tennessee has exercised a little bit of demons with LSU. Next demon to exercise is the big one for Tennessee fans, the historic rivalry. The people my age and older, the one that we focus on, Alabama. The old saying was Phil Fulmer got fired because he couldn't beat Florida, and Johnny Majors got fired because he couldn't beat Alabama, right? So those are the two teams you got to beat every now and then, right? And for Tennessee. So how does Tennessee handle the pressure? They handled the pressure well against Pittsburgh. The errors against Pittsburgh on the road were execution errors. They weren't mental errors. They weren't emotional errors. Same thing with Florida. They came into that game. They handled the pressure well. They executed well. The mistakes they did make were just hustle mistakes. And then they went down to Baton Rouge and put a complete game together and won decisively against, even at 11 o'clock, a hostile environment. They opened the gates at 9, started selling beer at 9. And by, they opened early, they drank early, and they left early. So they handled the pressure there. They handled the pressure there well, too. All season long, They've looked like a different team. They look even under the Pruitt and Jones years, those teams looked like they had that burden of the Tennessee. I want to say jinx, but they had the burden of the Tennessee history on their shoulders. This team looks different. It seems to know the Tennessee history and fully embrace and respect the history of Tennessee football, but it doesn't look like they wear it like a yoke on their shoulders. The Jones and Pruitt era teams did that. I think that's maybe a product of getting some guys in, transfer, Hendon Hooker, Brew McCoy, some of those guys who know what Tennessee is and embrace it, but don't necessarily have the yoke of those letdowns and expectations on them. So I think that's key number 3, handle the pressure, which they've done so far this season. And then number 4, I think, is can Tennessee sustain an effective run game? 263 rush yards against LSU. A lot of people don't talk about that. Look, Hendon Hooker only had 27 pass attempts. What Tennessee was able to do against LSU was really run the ball down their throat. Very physical, own the defensive line, own the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. We've already talked about defensive line. Offensive line, even without left tackle Gerald Mincey, really pushed LSU's defensive line around all day long. LSU had no sacks, only 2 tackles for loss, and Tennessee put up 263 rush yards. I'm telling you right now, if Tennessee's offense can have an effective run game on Saturday, Tennessee stands a real good chance of winning that game. You get an effective run game, and then you have somebody like Hendon Hooker controlling the offense. That is lethal. That is lethal. Even if Tennessee's secondary is still a suspect, that would be lethal. So 1, Bryce Young status. 2, how does Alabama's defense handle Tennessee's tempo? 3, how does Tennessee handle the pressure? And then 4, can the Vols establish a run game? To me, those are the 4 big keys for this Saturday's game.
All right, so we're talking on a Monday. If you don't want to give me a prediction, you don't have to. What do you think happens Saturday?
So I'm going to be honest with you. We're on a Monday, so this could change by Friday.
Yeah.
In the Nick Saban era, I've never bet against Alabama until somebody proves them wrong. I think it's going to be competitive. I think Tennessee will keep it close, but I have a hard time for years. For years, people said, "Oh, this is Georgia's year." I remember Alabama was going to Georgia. I probably got the years wrong. I think it was 2013. Georgia was their interconference team, and that was the year that Georgia was going to finally take over as kings of the SEC from Alabama. I think Alabama went there and beat them like 45-10, just an absolute, absolute punch in the mouth. And that was the last time. I said this is the last time I'm going to go against Alabama until somebody shows that they can consistently beat Alabama. I think Alabama wins a close one on the road. They've been here before. They've been in tough situations. They've had a target on their back for 15 years. Saban knows what he's doing. So having said that, for the first time in a long time, Tennessee has a legit shot to win this game. Tennessee comes into the game with a bona fide and legitimate reason to think they can win this game, particularly if Alabama plays like they did against Texas A&M. Look, Tennessee's going to win the game. They've certainly closed the gap. But if you're asking me today on Monday who I think is going to win the game, I have a hard time believing Alabama will not find a way to win the game against Tennessee. As painful as it is for me to say that, that's just kind of the reality of college football. Until you beat Alabama, you can't really expect to beat them until you actually beat them.
Yeah, and it's going to be a big deal if they pull this off on Saturday. I mean, I can imagine what Knoxville is going to be like if it does happen. So it's going to be fun, and this has been fun, Mike. I appreciate you coming on and talking Tennessee football with me here on the show. If everyone will catch you online, where can they find you?
Sure, you can find my writing at lastwordoncollegefootball.com. I cover Tennessee and Army athletics. I co-host a podcast called Yards and Stripes. If you're interested in Service Academy football, I talk a little bit of Army, Air Force, and Navy football with 2 other co-hosts. And then you're always welcome to hit me up on Twitter at MikeL_LWS. Let's talk football. That's what that accounts for, is talking football. Phil, would love to engage with some of your great listeners. And Phillip, it's always a pleasure joining you. Always great to talk football with you, my friend.
Absolutely, Mike. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, and thank you again to Mike Loveall for taking time out coming on today's edition of Talking SEC. Always a great time when I get the chance to talk to Mike about Tennessee football, SEC football, college football as a whole. And go check out his work. You'll get the grades on Sunday for actually Saturday. It'll probably be up Saturday or Sunday when it comes to the Alabama-Tennessee game. So before we get out of here, we're right at the 30-minute mark. Try to keep this thing between 30 and 40 minutes. Just some news items around the SEC since I last talked to you guys on Monday morning. And that podcast was recorded on Sunday night. Some quarterback updates. Some injured quarterbacks in the SEC, because my theme from this past week was the injured quarterbacks in the conference. So just looking at some updates. Bryce Young, of course, we just mentioned. We don't know. Is he or is he not going to play against Tennessee on Saturday? Well, Nick Saban said hopefully we're going to try to get him ready to play this week. But this is something nobody can predict, how quickly this is going to give him an opportunity to be able to go out and do what he needs to do. We'll see as the week progresses. I don't know. I don't have an update much more than that. Of course, this changes things. If Bryce Young's there, holy cow, we definitely have a big-time ball game. Jalen Milroe did make some mistakes. He did some good things against Texas A&M this past Saturday, but he also had the 3 turnovers, the 2 fumbles, and the 1 interception. Now look at Arkansas. They are playing BYU this Saturday. Arkansas is now 3-3 after starting 3-0, losing to A&M. They lost to Mississippi State. Of course, they lost to Alabama. Sam Pittman on KJ Jefferson said it's a normal week. He just can't get hit today, that would be protocol. He never gets hit anyway at practice, so he can go ahead and do his full thing today. Of course, that was on Monday. So that pretty much sounds like KJ Jefferson will be a go against BYU on Saturday for the Razorbacks. And then with Kentucky, Will Levis, not as much of a quote here. Of course, this team is 4-2, started 4-0. They've lost the last 2 games, Ole Miss, and they lost to South Carolina 14-24 this past Saturday. He didn't play, Will Levis, due to the foot injury. He is listed as QB1 on the depth chart that was released by Kentucky. And on Monday, Mark Stoops said he is day-to-day. So we'll see. It looks like they're progressing toward he will play against Mississippi State Saturday night, but nothing is official on that yet. Had the SEC awards come out this week. The weekly awards. Co-offensive player of the week is Mississippi State quarterback Will Rogers. Let's see if I can talk here today on the podcast. He had 395 yards passing and 31 completions and 3 touchdowns versus Arkansas. Broke the SEC career record with 946 completions in just 28 games. Aaron Murray previously held that record, but he got it at 52 games. Of course, Aaron Murray, Georgia, Mark Richt, run-first offense. This is the air raid, so it's not surprising it gets broke that quickly when you're in that style of offense. Also, co-offensive player of the week is wide receiver over at Ole Miss. Jonathan Mingo had a big game. Broke the Ole Miss single game record for receiving yards. Of course, this was against Vandy with 9 catches. He had 2 touchdowns for 247 yards. The previous holder, Ole Miss in that category, was Elijah Moore from 2020. Broke it against Vandy for him. He had 238 yards in that one. Defensive player of the week, Florida. We talked about this guy a little bit on Monday's podcast. Jayden Hill, cornerback Florida, in the 24-17 win over Missouri. He had 2 interceptions, a 49-yard pick 6. This was his first career interceptions and first career touchdown at Florida. Special teams player of the week was Chase McGrath, kicker for Tennessee. He was 4-5 on field goals and 4-4 on extra points. Freshman of the week was Branson Robinson, running back for Georgia. Georgia had a big run today against Auburn for 292 yards in that one. He had a career-high 12 carries for 98 yards and 1 touchdown in the dominant victory over the Auburn Tigers. Offensive lineman of the week, Jovan Gwen from South Carolina. He graded out at 88% in the 24-14 win over Kentucky. Did not allow any pressures or quarterback sacks in the game. And South Carolina had 179 yards rushing in the game, and Marshawn Lloyd had 110 of those yards. Defensive lineman of the week, talked about it a little bit. Brian Young, defensive end for Tennessee, in the 40-13 win over LSU, had 2.5 sacks, which is tied for the most by any player in the SEC this year. I believe Will Anderson also had a game with 2.5 sacks. He also had 2.5 tackles for loss, 5 total tackles, and 5 quarterback pressures per PFF. Now, the SEC did release the schedule for Week 8, the 22nd of October. Tennessee will kick things off on that Saturday against UT Martin. It'll be 11 a.m. kickoff over on the SEC Network. Ole Miss and LSU, that will be the CBS game at 2:30. And as always, guys, I always have to mention this. I say Central Time because I'm in Alabama. Vanderbilt will be at Missouri. That's a 3 o'clock game on the SEC network. Mississippi State will be at Alabama. I'm looking forward to this one. I think this could be upset alert, especially coming off the Tennessee game for Alabama. But that will be 6 o'clock on ESPN. In the primetime SEC network game at 6:30 will be Texas A&M at South Carolina. Both those teams are off this week. And then real quickly looking at something I'm going to probably start doing each and every week here on the show, middle of the week. I'm going to rank the upcoming games. Which games should be at the top of your list, what games should be at the bottom. We got 6 games in the conference this week in week 7. My number 6 game, Vanderbilt at Georgia. Look, we know that Georgia's going to dominate this one. A very intriguing matchup, midseason non-conference game for Arkansas. They travel to play BYU. That's my number 5 game this week. My number 4 game is Auburn at Ole Miss. And why do you have this one so high? Auburn is horrible because this could be Brian Harsin's last stand. We'll see what happens. I'll not give it a pick. We're doing that on Friday, but this could be the last stand for Brian Harsin, and we'll see what happens because there's been some message board and online rumors that Auburn could go after Lane Kiffin. So that makes this game interesting to me. Number 3, I'm really looking forward to this game. I'm very excited. Big game for both teams, too. LSU at Florida. Both teams are 4-2 on the year. I'm very excited. I know right now as we talk here on Wednesday, Florida is a 2.5-point favorite. Number 2 game is obviously we're going to look at these games. Mississippi State at Kentucky. We just talked about Will Levis play. Will Rogers, co-SEC Offensive Player of the Week. If Will Levis plays, I'm looking for a lot of offense here in this game. Watch I say that. It'll be like a 17-14 football game between these two teams. Both teams can run the ball. Of course, you know, Chris Rodriguez is a hoss to deal with at Kentucky, but Mississippi State's got a solid running attack too as well, which is not something you see with Mike Leach offenses. And then the number 1 game, of course, we just got to talk about it with Mike. Number 3, Alabama at number 6, Tennessee. Right now, Alabama's listed as a 7.5-point favorite in that one. That's going to be fun. The atmosphere is going to be off the hook on Saturday there in Knoxville. And that's going to do it for this edition of Talking SEC. Kind of glad to have this show back. It really feels like I'm back home again. Tried some different things. Made the mistake by leaving this show. We're middle of the SEC season. We're bringing it back. We will get into some basketball, too, on the show. There's 3 this week. We're transitioning. This is a daily show next week. I'll be at this thing 5 days a week. And also let you guys know I've got another podcast coming that's college football related. But that one will be once a week. Talking Sunbelt. And look out for that. That will probably be a Thursday midweek podcast once a week talking about all things Sunbelt. Lean on football, may jump to some Sunbelt basketball toward it when football's over with. But I'll be joined by Josh Boutwell from Troy Messenger. We will be talking Troy Trojans playing Texas State this Saturday. So he will be my guest, but we'll go over because when that show comes on, we have a game Wednesday night in Sunbelt, so we'll talk about that. But that's kind of something for you guys to look out for. On Friday, we'll be back with another episode of Talking SEC. Matt Lowe will be joining me, always a good friend of the show. He will be joining me. We will be previewing and picking all the Week 7 SEC games. So it's going to be a lot of fun this upcoming week with some podcasts and especially the Sunbelt show and then doing the Talking SEC pick show on Friday. So I hope you guys check that out. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can check it out over on YouTube. 2 locations on YouTube. You can check it out on my personal YouTube account, Phillip Jordan. Just look it up. Also, the Talking SEC YouTube page. Just hit the subscribe button on both, hit the bell for all notifications, and leave a comment on a video. I'll also read that on a future edition as well. You can always email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a great Wednesday, and I'll talk to you Thursday on Talking Sunbelt, Friday right back here on Talking SEC.
Thank you for listening to Talkin SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.